Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections. Welcome to the October 2021 in-service training. If you're new to our in-service training videos, then I would definitely recommend watching these at 2x speed because there's a lot of information to cover. If you've already had a home inspection, you can find all of your inspector's contact information on your inspection dashboard. That way, if you have a question, you can reach right out to them. Otherwise, I would recommend you go to our website, twomoosehomeinspections.com. You can send us an email or fill out one of our online forms. Let's go ahead and jump into Notion and see what we have going on. So for October 2021, we have a roof that had some prior repairs. And the reason this is important is because did they disclose this? Was that something that the seller said, or is this just something that the inspector happened to find? And with these repairs, they weren't done well. So that's kind of a problem all on its own. If we then move on to the next thing, baseboard heat. So the heater wasn't functioning. So what we do is we go through, we turn on all the thermostats, we check everything to make sure that everything is working. And instead of just going around and saying, oh, it feels warmer, it feels colder, we have our thermal cameras that can definitively state this is how warm it has gotten. And then that way, if it's getting too hot or if it's not getting hot at all, then we have that ability to kind of take a look at that kind of stuff and go from there. So our next one, the baseboard is too hot. You can see we have some of those scorch marks right above that baseboard heat. The problem with this is if a drape were to come in contact with it, if let's say the bed had a sheet or anything along those lines, it will catch on fire. And additionally, some of these, we will see that we have some scorching on the wall. And thankfully, the wall material is strong enough that it doesn't catch the wall on fire, but that is still definitely a risk. Once you start seeing stuff like that, it might be recommended just to have somebody come out, professionally evaluate it, make sure that it is heating in the right range of temperature. Otherwise, get it replaced because baseboard heaters, very inexpensive, very easy to just get replaced. So the next thing is radon. Make sure you get your house tested for radon. We are in a zone 1. That is the highest level of radon in the entire country. So I highly recommend that you get the house tested. And what you can see is that this right here has an average of 17.4 picocuries per liter, 17.4 picocuries per liter. Anything above 2, you should start looking into getting it repaired. Anything above 4, then in a real estate transaction, then the seller needs to take care of it before you take ownership of the house. This right here had a minimum of 7 all the way up to 17 as the average, and then 24.6. That's insane. That is very, very high and definitely not ideal at all. So stair movement, great video here, but as you walk on the stairs just move and do their thing. If there's any kind of movement, then the fasteners, so like the nails and the screws that are put in, start moving, and then what they are attached into starts to wear out, and then the fasteners come out, and then we have some collapse possibilities, some issues. I always love having notes from the seller. That is about as good as it gets. Hot and cold water reversed and shower. Okay, well, is that an easy fix? No, not at all. What you'd have to do is actually tear out the wall and then put the pipes on the opposite sides, and that's, you know, gonna probably be a solid copper. It's just not something that's gonna be easily fixed, easily replaced. And they had to put that sign there because if it's predictable, it's preventable. Which means if it's predictable that somebody would go in and they think that they have cold and they actually put on hot or this or that, and they scald themselves, hurt themselves in some way, then you could find yourself liable. And we definitely don't want to have something like that happen. So anyway, it's always fun whenever we get notes from the sellers, and I love it because they aren't trying to hide anything. They're very clear that, hey, this is an issue, and I like that. I really enjoy that level of integrity. So multiple deck deficiencies. Yeah, there were some deck deficiencies here. And it's so interesting. Decks are one of those things that I just feel like people are like, well, this is simple construction. This is something that I could do myself. And the reality is you can't. A lot of times there are so many small details that are missed, and they just add up to have some really catastrophic type issues. So like we have inadequate anchoring on this. We have a whole bunch of issues with the stairs not being the way they should. No railings, no guardrails, no nothing. And it just compiles and compiles and compiles, and then we just end up having some major issues, whether it be structural or from a safety standpoint. And this has both. So if you are going to install pavers, let me just tell you, this is not how you install pavers. And a lot of times with real estate transactions, sometimes people will do things that make the house look better than the house actually is, or try to make the house look better. And you can see that it's just done quickly. And so I think this right here, they went to the local hardware store, they bought some pavers, they threw it down so it didn't look like a whole bunch of dirt down at the bottom of the stairs, but it was done incorrectly, and it shows and creates tripping hazards. So just so you're aware. All right, the protectant is failing on this wall. And the thing about the protectant failing on this wall is that, does it need a protectant? And the answer is always gonna be yes. So this wood is an organic compound. It wants to break down. It wants to turn to dirt. And if we can put a clear coat on there or some type of stain, then that would be excellent. If you wanna paint the house, that's great. But I mean, paint is not going to last that long. Maybe you can get somewhere from 5 to 8 years with a stain, maybe 10 to 12 years with a paint. But the problem with the paint is that it doesn't last forever. You're going to have to repaint, and you've lost all of the wood grain, which makes this a beautiful house. And so clear coat or some type of stain is exactly what you want, but you're going to be replacing it rather frequently. So next is that we have stairs where you have more than 4 inches of space between the balusters. And the problem with this is that you have to keep in mind that if there is a child in the house, so put yourself in the mind whenever we're doing home inspections as a 90-year-old version of yourself and as a 6-year-old version of yourself, and maybe even younger. And if you're crawling around, is there the possibility that a baby could fall through that? And the answer is yes. And so we always want to make sure that we are being as safe as possible. And the reason that these standards exist is because people have gotten hurt in the past. And so again, if it's predictable, it's preventable. So when we move on to the next thing, it's really interesting whenever there are light switches that are taped over, because you have to ask, why is it taped over? Is it because it's a convenience thing and maybe they have their TV hooked into a wall outlet around the perimeter of the floor? Do they have some other device that is running off of this? And why does this have to stay on? Is that a wiring deficiency, or is it just because they have, baseboard things plugged in like computers and they don't want to accidentally flip the switch and turn off a computer, which would turn off some outlets around, the bottom of the floor? Maybe that's what they have going on. So the next thing is, this house has a 100 amp service panel. Right now, the average is about a 200 amp service, and a lot of homes are moving into their 400 amp service. And so when you think about all the electronics that we have, the electronics that we had 50, 60 years ago are nothing in comparison to what we have today. The amount of electricity that is needed from the average home has just expanded crazy. And so a 100 amp service really isn't enough for like a 4-person family. So mom, dad, or, parents, children, that is something that we definitely want to have whenever there are 4 people in the household. We definitely want to have 200 amps. Kind of just think of it as 50 amps per person is a safe bet. And then obviously, if you're a person that does a lot of things with their electronics, there's a lot more TVs, there's a lot more gaming consoles, computers, tablets, whatever it may be, then maybe you do need more power. Or if you do something in your garage like welding or any other kind of activity like that, then yeah, you probably need more power. But whenever we see 100 amps, that's really the bare minimum of what you could possibly have and still be happy in your house as far as electricity load is concerned. So again, another note from the seller. I love having notes from the seller. Again, I love that integrity. It is very, very nice to see. It's definitely one of those things. So next is there's an active leak underneath the sink. And you can see that a lot of times this MDF, this is a medium density fiberboard. Whenever it gets wet, it kind of swells and expands. And whenever that swells and expands, there's no way to take that back to the condition that it was originally in. You have to replace that part of the cabinet. And so that does get kind of expensive from time to time. So in this case right here, the leak is coming because there are 2 little things that need to be tightened. And unfortunately, people don't always tighten down their plumbing the way that they should. And this can be tightened without any tools, just by hand. But clearly the issue is there, and either it was ignored, neglected, or they just didn't know how to fix it. But that's as simple. If you can tighten down the cap on a drink, then you can tighten down that. So rodent droppings. So whenever there are mice or other things like that, you have to keep in mind that whenever a mouse is scurrying across the ground, whenever they go, they are constantly just dripping a little bit of urine, and that is actually how they leave a scent trail to tell them how to get back home. And so anywhere that there's a mouse, there's mouse urine on the floor, so that's gross. And then additionally, we then have all of the rodent droppings, all the poop. And so the problem with that is that the rodent droppings can have a virus called hantavirus, and hantavirus has a 40% kill rate. So basically, if it's between you and 3 friends that got hantavirus, probably one of your friends is going to die. And realistically, it is a very, very dangerous thing. So if you do see rodent droppings, eliminate the mice first. Once that's taken care of, then you can clean up all the rodent droppings. Just wear a really good respirator to make sure that you aren't going to get any kind of issues with the hantavirus. So Federal Pacific electric panels. So the Federal Pacific electric panels, we've said it a million times. If you have one, get rid of it. Spend the $2,000, get a new electric panel, get something that has AFCI and GFCI. AFCI is arc fault circuit interrupter. GFCI is a ground fault circuit interrupter. AFCI, if there is a wire that is nicked and the electricity is just arcing, then it is going to shut that off. GFCI is if I touch something and now the electricity is going through me instead of going through something else, then it'll shut off. We can have our service panels have both AFCI and GFCI, and that is ideal. All right, these windows, possible seal failure. That's a definite seal failure for sure. So what happens is between two panes of windows, basically if there was only one pane, then what you get is called thermal bridging. So right now, is my hand warm or cold? Well, you don't know until you touch my hand. Then you can tell if my hand is warm or cold. So same thing, that is thermal bridging, where that heat has transferred from one surface to the next. If we have single pane windows, then that heat transfers through that window very easily. So then we did double pane windows, and then we either fill the center between those two panes with argon gas, or maybe create a vacuum, or whatever it may be, or regular air, but you have to be careful with humidity. But it just depends on when the window was manufactured and what was being done. But basically, there is a gap between two panes of glass. Now, if air can move in and out, then so can moisture, and then whenever that happens, we get something that looks just like this. And those windows functionally are not going to keep heat inside the house the way they should. And additionally, they are very difficult to look at the beautiful mountain vistas whenever you have a window that you can't even look through. So, fill spout loose. The problem with the fill spout being loose is that you have to keep in mind that the shower or whatever is waterproof. So water comes down, hits the shower wall, and it's waterproof. Great. But in order for us to get water in there, we have to have something coming basically through the wall. So we have a pipe coming through the wall. And so now we have a way for water to come down, hit the pipe, go through the wall, and now we have water in the back of the wall, which is going to create mold and a whole bunch of other issues. So what we want to do is just seal right above there and make sure that we don't have any water going there. Now, one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that you don't want to necessarily seal all the way around. You might want to just seal 90% and leave an opening at the bottom. The reason why is if water does get behind there, maybe we still want that water to come out instead of being trapped. So something to think about there. Then we have the flue vent is taped here. And so the problem with this being taped is that that's incorrect. Additionally, why is it being taped? Could that be a combustible material? Maybe, maybe not. But the real thing is that if it needs to be taped, then you're using the wrong type of ductwork. That's a good way to look at it, good way to think about it. Or does that mean that maybe it was too long of a run, they had something clogging it, and they were getting backdrafts, or they were getting some kind of gases, carbon monoxide, or byproducts of the combustion process coming back into the house? Or is it that is so corroded because of incomplete combustion that they then taped it up so that way they could hide it from us? There's a lot of reasons why people do the things that they do. So this right here, there's some valve corrosion, whatever. And so what really happened here, if you take a look, is that this right here for a boiler, as water comes through, there's basically like a scrubber, a mesh, and water will come through, and any little air bubbles are going to hit into this mesh and then come up to the top. And then this valve here allows air to be released, but doesn't allow water to be released. And so then what will happen is that to get rid of air bubbles, as water passes past this, it is then going to scrub out the air bubbles and release it. Now, if that valve has failed or gone bad, then you start to see something just like this. And so all that they should have to do is replace the valve at the top. It's a relatively easy thing, except for this system is under pressure, and so we have to relieve the pressure before we're able to work on it. And sometimes that is above the abilities of a novice homeowner. So then we have gutters and downspouts that are clogged. We want that water to go all the way away from the house. And a lot of times we will have chipmunks and other rodents that will fill up those pipes with nesting material, and then your drains from your gutters are completely useless. Absolutely 100% completely useless. So we want to clean that out, get that taken care of. Additionally, in our area, in a high alpine environment, if your house is using heat tape to melt that snow and ice off, then you want that heat tape to go all the way down and all the way out, and maybe even extend a foot or two outside of this pipe to make sure that any water that goes down that gutter has a clear path to get out of there. Otherwise, the freeze thaw is going to expand and it's going to break that pipe. When we take a look here, it looks like we have some heat tape doing what it does. And so that goes to show that this particular house, is the house that has heat tape. So we need to have going down the gutters that heat tape. So the carpet is dirty. Yeah, that's a thing. Who cares? It's a dirty carpet. Well, if you're buying the house, and maybe you are buying the house sight unseen, you've never seen the house. So if you've never seen the house and you don't know if the carpet's dirty, I guarantee you that all those beautiful realtor photos that want you to buy the house and show you all the best angles of the house, they aren't showing you the dirty stained carpets. And if they are, they're upping the exposure of the camera so that way everything's like kind of blown out and white and looks like extra clean. and that might not be the case. And maybe if you have certain allergies or other things like that, you might have to replace the entire carpet, and that obviously is an expense. And so we want you to be aware of some of the expenses that do exist. So weather stripping damage. Remember we talked about mice scurrying across the floor and how they're just leaving little droplets of urine so that way they know how to get back to where they came from? Well, how do you think they get into the house? Whenever we have gaps between our garage door and in the ground, whenever we have gaps between doors, you need to watch some YouTube videos to see what a mouse can actually squeeze through. It is so impressive, and believe me, mice can come into that with that type of an opening. If you can see daylight, you can see a mouse. It's as simple as that. All right, blinds are damaged. Whenever the blinds are damaged, sometimes the blinds match all the other blinds in the house, in the room, or whatever it may be. And that means that just because one blind is damaged, you might actually have to replace multiple blinds. You might have to replace, 4 blinds, 5 blinds, 10 blinds. And if that's the case, to make everything match, well, then it becomes a huge expense. So, unfinished installation of this window. Yep. Now the question is this brand new unfinished installation, or is it very, very recent? And so whenever you're buying the house, this is a great opportunity to say, hey, I need you to finish installing this window, or say, I need you to give me money, not just money off the house, but I'm talking cash so I can fix this window, one or the other. And you and your realtor will obviously discuss all of that. So these shingles here, they're done. This could have been from high wind, a whole bunch of other things, but I believe this was high wind, and it just started to rip the shingles off of the roof. And so the shingles were improperly installed to begin with, and then it just leads to issues like this. All right, installation inadequate. So if you take a look here, your house, the outside of the house, you have to think of it as a rain jacket. And if you think of your house as a rain jacket, and you just had like a big hole right here exposing, your studs or whatever for rain and other things like that to go into, then of course the rain jacket's not going to do its job at all. Any hole, any issue, any whatever needs to be taken care of, needs to be resolved. And in this particular case, it's just poor craftsmanship. And you wouldn't believe how much we end up seeing something like that. So here's a close-up picture right here. And so if you were a bird making a nest, if you were a squirrel, a chipmunk, even raccoons can fit inside of there. If you're any of those things, then you just found yourself a beautiful, nice home. And if you're a rain droplet, you're probably going to go inside the house as well. And you can see some of the water staining on that 2x4 stud. So there's already been moisture-related issues with this, less than ideal. All right. Here's the thing. I'm not going to get on a soapbox. I promise. I'm going to try really hard not to. But here's the thing that really upsets me, is that you call it a bedroom and therefore you need to have egress. Then you have an egress window that is just completely inadequate. Not only is this window too high off of the ground, but additionally, whenever you open up that window, there is no way that even a child could fit out of that window, because you can't open the window any further than it shows. And then in addition to not being able to open the window any further, even if you could, then you have the arms that are the metal actuation arms that basically do this type of maneuver, and they would prevent you from getting out. And there's just no safe way to exit from this area. So if there was a fire, heaven forbid, this would probably be a room that would claim a life, because not only can you not jump up into that window, but if you can't get out of the window, then what are you going to do? Break the window, and then you're going to have bloody hands and arms and legs, and that could be just as dangerous as the fire itself. So something to be mindful of. All right, the dryer vent termination, not good. So you just do not want a dryer vent terminating inside the house. The reason why is because all that moisture that is on your clothes it doesn't just disappear. All right, that moisture goes somewhere. And where does it go? It goes to this vent right here. And then this vent, all it does is it catches the lint. It doesn't do anything other than catching the lint. So all of that humidity, all that moisture goes into your house. And now think about how wet your clothes are. And would you ever take your clothes that wet and put them inside of a closet? No. Why not? Well, because it would create mold. And then that's obviously a very, very bad thing, especially for people that have sensitivities to mold, for sure. So if you would never take a whole pile of wet clothes and put it inside of a closet, why would you do this? Why? You wouldn't. This is just, what they need to do is a condensing. They need a condensing dryer. A condensing dryer, basically just like a dehumidifier, will take all of that moisture and then it turns it into water that it then drains out. That's what you're looking for. So GFCI protection not installed. Again, ground fault circuit interrupter. If I touch something and the electricity comes through me onto the ground, well, then that is bad. but the GFCI should protect me that I get hurt but not killed. And so really any flat surface, anywhere that a liquid could be spilled and come in contact with some electrical device needs to have GFCI protection, which in today's standards is basically every single outlet in the house should be GFCI protected. But we're really going to be sticklers about areas like the kitchen, laundry room, bathroom. So moving on, we have dark rooms. So this is something that Shay really points out a lot, and I really appreciate this. The reason that he points out these dark rooms is because these are rooms that were installed with no overhead lighting. They were all just, I need you to have, like some type of a lamp or something else like that. And sometimes that, can be challenging because maybe the way you want to set up the room, you can't have a lamp, or you can't have as many lamps as you want, or, it just doesn't work. So it's just good to know that, hey, these rooms might need additional lighting. Now, with this particular drop ceiling, you should be able to install some can lights relatively easy. But it's just one of those things that if you're buying the home, you just need to know that, hey, if I'm going to make this room the way that I want, I either need to invest in some lamps or I need to invest in some lights because this room is not ready to be lived in just yet. All right. We have open breaker slots in the panel. If you can put your finger inside and touch the bus bar, and the bus bar is near the center and it's the shiny silver part, if you can touch that by putting your hands into those holes, well, then you're out of luck. That will kill you, and there's no GFCI protection or anything that will be able to help you in that case. So additionally, what we have on the one way over on this side is that you can see that breaker, instead of the breaker being put in perfectly, it is now sliding down because those filler plates, in addition to preventing you from putting your fingers in there and getting electrocuted, those filler plates also make sure that all of the circuits stay where they need to be. So what's wrong if you have a circuit breaker that is in like this? Well, the problem is that instead of having a really tight connection right here, you now have a loose connection, and then that can create some arcing back and forth, which is going to create heat, which then can create a fire. So not a great thing. This one made me chuckle. I'm pretty sure that what they did was they covered over top of the vent. There's a vent that allows the hot air to come out, and I think that they covered it over with duct tape. So not the best thing to do. Please don't repair appliances with duct tape. There is an appropriate way to repair it, and if not, then just replace it. I no longer think that this is able to operate the way that it was intended. Here's a nice little close-up of that duct tape there. All right, so we have screens. Now, what happens with these screens is that you can see in this picture right up here that the screen is actually corroded away, and that is a thing that will happen. So we need to have screens on our vents, and the reason why is because birds and other animals, insects, whatever, can get inside of those vents. And if they get inside of those vents, well, the problem is they can clog the vents. If they clog the vents, depending on what the vent is used for, best case, it just won't work the way it's supposed to. Worst case, it'll then create a backdraft situation where we've now filled up our house with dangerous carbon monoxide, which could definitely put our family at risk of death. And so we just want to make sure that we have appropriate covers on these things. Now, one of the things like a dryer, you don't want to put a mesh screen over top of that because it'll catch lint and then clog itself. That needs to be able to breathe a little bit more. And so there are cages that go over top of it. So instead of being just a vent that just covers here, there's a cage that will then allow the lint to go where the lint needs to go, but still prevent chipmunks and other things like that, mice, from getting in there. So, all right, this jetted bathtub had a whole bunch of debris inside of the jets. That's pretty common and normal. You just want to make sure that like once a month you are running your jets, making sure that that there's nothing in there that shouldn't be in there. Sometimes, like depending on where you live, you might have even insects like spiders and other things like that start making homes inside of your jets. And so it's just a good idea to just run them regularly to make sure you aren't getting buildups of water, scale, soap scum, other things like that inside of the jets. Especially if you're going to take a bath. If you take a bath, you need to run the jets. If you're just taking a shower, you do not need to run the jets. So moisture staining present and inactive. And so this right here, what caused this staining? Is it that we had a whole bunch of hot, humid air coming through here on a cold surface and it created condensation? Maybe. Is it that there was a leak from up above? Probably. But unfortunately, the moisture meter did not detect any, well, I guess that is fortunately, the moisture meter did not detect any additional moisture in that area, and the thermal camera also didn't see anything standing out. And so the real question is, when did this happen and why did this happen? And is it going to happen again, or did somebody repair it? That's a very important thing to keep in mind. All right, wooden shingles. shakes, shingles, depending on how the shingle was made. Most of these houses that have this, it is a huge safety issue. Imagine that we have a wildfire and an ember comes floating over, and then that ember lands on top of that wooden roof. That wooden roof is going to catch on fire. If you really love the look of a wooden roof, then modern wooden shingles will actually have a fire retardant impregnated inside of the wood, so then that way the wood is not going to catch on fire. That's really what you're looking for. Ideally, you would have wood shingles like that that are impregnated with a fire retardant to make them safe. And they will last a very, very long time, and some people really like the look. There are better, more modern materials, but if that is the look and the style that you want, just know that there is a modern, safe version of this. So just to keep in mind. So multiple window concerns. there were definitely some multiple window concerns. First off, you can see that this tarp is being used, but the way in which the tarp was installed, there just shows like a lack of understanding of how rainwater rolls down things. But the window is also missing, so I think the window was broken out. They put some insulation on there just to kind of temporarily take care of it. Then you see right here that we have a tarp, and the way they installed the tarp, just terrible, absolutely terrible. And so that water is still going to be coming in. And then you can see here's another broken window, and you can also see that we have a little bit of a settlement crack right down here at the footwall of the foundation. So anyway, lots of things going on right there. I think all those windows are going to need to be replaced, and I also would love to have a structural engineer come and take a look, because if you see the way this is just broken off right here, that's broken off right there, we have a broken window. Did somebody hit the window? Did something hit the window? Or is the issue really more involved with the fact that there's a little bit of settlement in that area, and did that cause the window to break? And if that's the case, we definitely want to talk to somebody. So leak present. All right, so above the dryer, there was a leak underneath the kitchen sink. And so that means, well, that's just a bad thing, basically. And so thank you, thermal camera, for finding those things, because sometimes you cannot see it. Just like right here, it's kind of hard to see, but with the thermal camera, it pops out really, really well. So we definitely want to fix any kind of leak, so that way we don't get things like fungal growth. And so this right here, is it mold? Yeah, probably, 100% yes. But if you take a look, all this white stuff here, all the black stuff over here, then we have the poor drywall that is just totally decayed. All of that is really a big health hazard, and you want that to be taken care of as much as possible. All right, urine smell present. There are certain things that my nose can no longer smell. But I will tell you, whenever I walk into a house that has pet urine, oh my goodness, it's like being punched right in the face. And golly, some of these houses are terrible, this particular house included. So stairs settled. Pretty clear that the stairs are not at the level that they were supposed to be at, and that's because this is not how you're supposed to build stairs. But anyway, the stairs have settled, so the stairs are going to need to be repaired or replaced to be safe. Then there's moisture staining present. So wood is one of those materials that never forgets. It never, ever, ever forgets, which means if you want to know if this is an ongoing issue, you can take a pencil, draw right where the water has gone to. So outline where the water has gone to with a pencil. And if next year it's right at that pencil mark, then great. The issue clearly is no longer an issue. But if the pencil mark is here and it has grown, the water staining has grown and pushed more of those minerals inside the wood out, well, then that's obviously a really big deal, and you want to get that taken care of, resolved, whatever it may be. All right, remember earlier we were talking about these baseboard heaters. Well, this baseboard heater is scorching the wood that is around it. That is a fire safety hazard. We really want to make sure that we are not catching our houses on fire with our baseboard electric heat. There is nothing around it that is combustible except for the wood that it is attached to. So big safety concern there. All right, multiple areas of damage on the roof, prior repairs, so on and so forth. Remember we were talking about the water inside of a shower, and it comes out of that fill spout, and how we only want to caulk around like 90% of it. Same thing here. This is the wrong place to be putting any kind of sealant. What happens is the water is going to be coming down the roof, and as that water comes down the roof, if it were to get trapped behind here, then we want it to be able to escape. Unfortunately, because they put all of this sealant, the gray sealant on there, as that water comes down, the water will be trapped. So if the water is coming down, and let's just say it just happens to get behind here, now this traps it in place, and this is going to just fill up with water until it goes into here, and then it just comes into the house. So whoever installed this did it completely incorrectly. Same thing here. Really bad job putting these shingles on here. Very, very bad job. That's not even how you're supposed to use those shingles. Like where the shingles should overlap versus what they did. They used an entire sheet, just totally incorrect. All right, so the last thing that I'll end on is this right here. This is basically an area where, unfortunately, a person had passed away inside of this house, and we weren't notified by the listing agent. We weren't notified by the buyer's agent. Hopefully, it was disclosed. It was a neighbor that was telling us that a person had passed away, and having worked in law enforcement for a long time, I will tell you that whenever somebody is there for a long period of time without being discovered, unfortunately, this is the aftermath, because as things break down, things can be stained, damaged, whatever. The smell in this area was extreme, and enough about, this. We'll just get that picture out of there. But basically, what I'm saying is that whenever you have a house and somebody has passed away inside of the house, there's a potential that it's no big deal. Like, for instance, if somebody is on hospice care and they have a nurse, round the clock watching them, and that person passes away, and then they have time for family to come and grieve and do what they do, then it's not a big deal. Like, that is a completely natural thing. I have a hereditary trait. It's called death. And I believe that everybody else that I know has the same thing. I do not know a human that has lived forever. And so the thing is, we all die. It's a very natural part of life. And whenever a person is then taken to their burial site or cremated or whatever it may be, taken to the funeral home, then really there's nothing wrong with buying a house where somebody has passed away. The real issue is the house like what we just had here, where a person dies unexpectedly and is alone, and then time does what it does until the neighbors notice and then call for somebody to do a welfare check, basically. At that point, obviously, too late for anything to be done. But with this particular type of a house, the smell was just too much, just way too much, because we've been in houses that have been used as like commercial cooking areas, and sometimes you can just smell that smell of grease and cooking in the walls, and it's kind of the same kind of thing. So what I'd say is that whenever we find issues like this, if you're getting one heck of a good deal, great. But whenever there's an issue such as this, the recommendation on the phone is you should probably go yourself to make sure this is something that you can manage. Because you may not be able to. You might get a super duper good deal and not be able to manage this type of an issue. So again, the whole point of home inspections is not to say, oh, you shouldn't buy this house or you shouldn't buy that house. The whole point is to say, hey, listen, this house has some issues. Are you comfortable with dealing with these issues? And for most people, they say, yeah, I can totally do this. And for some people, that particular house would be a deal breaker. And other people would say, this is a great investment opportunity, plow it down, put a new one in its place. And the property, the acreage, whatever, is worth doing that. And so it really just depends on each individual and what works best for them. But enough about that particular topic. Sorry to end on such a morbid, sad note, but if you have any questions or if you'd like to schedule a home inspection, please visit twomoosehomeinspections.com. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.